So today we are joined by Monica. Monica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, everybody. My name is Monica Kaufman. I'm a certified financial planner, financial advisor, mom, and obviously somebody from the US. I live in Texas, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So, I thought it would be really interesting to have a bit of a money slant on what's important for women because I think often women don't think about money or will have certain barriers to earning money or keeping money or doing the right thing with money because often women, well, traditionally certainly, have relied on their partner or family to support them and they haven't took control themselves.
Okay. This is a subject that's near and dear my heart. My mother, brilliant woman. I'll just give you this one, and this really affected her. When she was growing up, she was born in 38, and it was at the tail end of the Great Depression. Her parents had some very serious financial setbacks because of it. So when that happened, her parents would do things like divide the food in the kitchen and hand them out. She has an older brother and a younger sister that came along later, but when they would hand the food out, there was more for the son than there was for her. There was always money to send him to camp or to do extracurriculars or school clothes and shoes. She got her first job between second and third grade. And I have no idea who hired her at the school where she went to school. It must have been a charity thing, whatever it was. But she worked doing odd jobs around the school during her summer so that she would have enough money for school clothes and shoes.
Sorry, remind me what age is second or third grade?
So figure you're 6 when you finish kindergarten. So then first would be 7 and second would be 8. So between 8 and
So
9. She got
so very young.
very young, but that's how she made sure that she had school clothes and school shoes. Very particular, always needed to make sure that her appearance was perfect. She gets a little annoyed with me because I'm not like that. Sorry. Okay, she'll look at me and go, "Oh, that's embarrassing." It is what it is. But she always took great pride in this and she worked. She put herself into a private university in Cleveland, where we grew up, and she was a scholarship student. She worked, and this was back before this was common. And she went into math, and she was the first woman there, and she was from the wrong side of the tracks, so to speak. Okay, and people were not very kind to her. So at that point, and just to make the point, she was in a program where if you needed extra help and you wanted to go get into a section where they would talk to you and go over things and explain things, you had to be invited in. Well, none of the section leaders were willing to invite her in, so she had to do all of it on her own. If she didn't get it from the professor, she had to do it on her own. End of her first year, they had a test to qualify to continue in math. So you weren't automatically accepted to finish math. And she took the test and she had the high score, and they published it in the local newspaper. It was a very big deal. She proved herself. And
Yeah.
that's the story of my mother. But she didn't learn how to manage money. She always managed her checkbook, meticulous about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say because traditionally, and I'm generalizing, not like the woman would handle like the household budget and making money go further in terms of getting value for money for the family and stuff like that.
Right.
But probably not think about investments and the future and stuff like that.
And that's the whole thing. So when my parents got divorced, I was 6 years old. All of those fears from her childhood and all of those insecurities came crashing back on her. And she went back to work. She had given up going to grad school and pursuing her career of choice in order to have a family. So you understand the sacrifices.
Yeah.
My mother, I'm one of 4. There are 2 girls, 2 boys. And my mother was incredibly insistent that I would do more, that there was a militant approach to this is equal. I'm not going to favor my sons over my daughters. And the expectations towards us were delivered equally. And my father shared those views. Don't get me wrong. He was totally into that. In fact, my father told the story. He went to medical school. His father was a doctor, and he talked his cousins, the women cousins, into going to medical school too, back when there were very few there. So I grew up with this. There was a joke, a patient of my father's once said, "Are the sons going to be doctors like you and the daughters nurses?" And my father looked and said, "My daughter has complete career freedom. She can choose any field of medicine she wants." And they looked and they were shocked. And that was the end of the conversation. So that's kind of how I grew up.
It's like the expectations, isn't it, for women has traditionally haven't been the same as for boys and men. I do think that's changing though.
It is. I'm seeing a lot of women now in marriages where they make considerably more than their husbands. I'm seeing women at the end of life or going into retirement where they have more money than their husbands. And it's causing friction. It's causing some resentment, especially when it's a blended family where it's not the first marriage. And so they come in and it's a question of how do you handle that process? And everybody comes at it from a different perspective. I have to give my stepfather a lot of credit. When my mother and my stepfather got married, he sat down and they agreed that there were 6 children, my mother's 4, his 2, one family, and that it was going to be equal across the board and everybody was family. And that was their approach from the get-go.
Yeah,
So
well, that's how it should be, really.
What?
I'm saying that's how it should be, really.
Well, you know what? But
well, even just to sit down and have a discussion about it. Not everybody does that.
That's the fear point. People are afraid to do it, especially when they're at a financial disadvantage or they feel vulnerable. And then there's a lot of people, like in the United States, divorce is very costly. And if you look at the statistics, when a woman gets divorced, on average, she gets knocked down in her standard of living considerably. Okay, and men are they find it easier to get remarried, and they get remarried faster and at a higher percentage. And when that happens, the income gets diverted into the new family. And that's a real challenge for a lot of women. So I mean, I understand where all of this comes from. There's always a reason, but that doesn't mean we can't rise above. I spoke to a woman last week. I was introduced to her. She made more money than her husband. She always made money close to what her husband made. She got divorced. She had the kids. She never got anything from him. And she made the decision. She took on the debt at the end of the marriage. She took on all the debt, none of the assets. Within 10 years, she had fully rebuilt herself. And she made the commitment that she was going to build her finances. Now she retired early when she wants to. She's also very, very, very busy at what she does now, but she made that decision. She published a book about this, and she's in better financial condition than her ex-husband.
Well, those are the stories that we like to hear, success ones. But often other women aren't supportive of successful women. And I think another barrier that women have is mindset.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if this is the same in America, because I think you've got a different attitude to business. But in England particularly, there's a view from some parts of the country that people shouldn't be rich, and this fat cat, and people with money are greedy and bad and all of this. And when I started in my business, I had to overcome a lot of barriers, like thinking that there's not enough money to go around and all of this kind of thing. And you have to get over that in order to make money.
I think some of that still is here. And I think there's something that people need to understand. One, money is nothing more than a set of tools in your hands. Okay?
Absolutely.
That's all it is. And once you understand that, you think, okay, you and I are communicating over the internet. Do you remember the first time you turned on a computer and had to work with it?
Yeah.
Were you a little scared, a little nervous? Like, what am I doing? Am I going to break this thing? Is this going to work?
Probably. I think the first time I put on a computer, I was little, and it was like for games.
Right.
So, but I remember the first time I got a computer that was connected to the internet, and that was for serious things like working on it. And yeah.
Okay, so, but that's the thing, you learned how to use it. And when you think about it, a fork and a knife, hopefully we learn how to use it. Not everybody we know has mastered it, unfortunately. But it's true. And it's sort of like, when you think about it, it's just a tool. Let's demystify it. And that's one of the things that I work with people on. But the other piece is, money doesn't make you happy. Okay? No. But whatever situation you have to deal with that's a challenge, you bring different tools. You bring the things you know how to do. You bring the relationships you have with other people who can help you. And then you also bring, when you have the money, what it is it gives you the flexibility to learn to do something, to hire somebody to do it for you. It's just the tool that facilitates that. And
I was going to
so,
say money does make the life a bit easier.
yeah, it does.
And like there's been a time in my life when I didn't have very much and I was bringing up children on my own. But that time has what it's given me is I'm very resourceful and I'm very good at solving problems without very much resource. And that's helped me in the business.
You know, it's interesting. We talk about things, and about a few years ago, before I decided to leave where I was and to start my program, okay, I literally had to sit down and I wound up sitting in front of a huge, big whiteboard, okay, and I had to diagram it out because I'm very, very, very visual. I had to see it. And what it boiled down to is I put it up and I labeled it spiritual, but it was the belief. I believe that I'm created to be responsible. Responsible means responsible is the flip side of freedom. It means I have the power to choose.
Yeah.
And so then where does it flow down? And what came back to me was, this is going to sound really crazy. What came back to me is it flows down and it flows into your physical. And that's how we first learn how to do things. Like we have to learn how to master our bodies. We have to learn how to take care of our bodies. We are not able to care for our bodies. There is no way we're free. It goes into the emotional, and then it goes into the intellectual, what I think about a situation. It goes into the relationships, and then it goes into the financial, because the financial is just the tool that you use.
Yeah.
And you cannot, two things that are very, very true. One is how you do anything is how you'll do everything. And the second thing is how you manage money or any of the other tools in your life is a reflection not of the tool, but of what's going on inside of you. So I started off studying economics and finance. And what I've discovered is that most of success is based on that decision, that emotional decision that you are going to succeed. You are going to get it done. It is a decision, and your subconscious has to be aligned with it. You have to really, truly mean it and believe that you can and will and should do it.
Yeah.
And once that happens, you're unstoppable.
Absolutely. It was definitely about mindset once, because I had my business, then I had some coaching, and then when I really worked on myself, that's when it really started taking off. So I've got this care business and we employ about 80 people.
How many?
80.
80? That's amazing.
Yeah, so basically it's the opposite of most businesses. Most businesses, you need to bring the work in to pay the staff so you can grow, whereas in care, you have to get enough work to pay for everything else. It's the work so the more people we can get to work, then the easier it is to pay for everything. So
that's awesome.
We needed that. We need the workers to be able to get the work. Basically, the work, there's lots of work. There's less people to employ.
I love the fact that you did that and you built it. So you built it from 0 to 80 people. How long did that take?
So I started in 2018.
Okay, that's amazing.
So
7 years.
Yeah, we've had 80 staff for about a couple of years now. So probably 5.
That's amazing. I should be interviewing you about all the things you did and all the changes. You know, tell me if this makes sense and tell me if this is a parameter. You can't go from literally the basement to the penthouse immediately. Everybody thinks you can. You can do it quickly, but you can't do it immediately. And the best metaphor I've heard is that up until recently, there was no way to hardwire and change your body so that you could go from never being at Mount Everest to the top, to the peak in one visit. So you would have to go, be there, leave, go, come, and then maybe go up to base camp, then leave, go up to base camp, stay and acclimate, maybe go up a little bit, then come down. And then after you did that, where you were going up and coming down and able to handle it physically and emotionally, then you could still try to climb to the peak. And unfortunately, not everybody makes it. There are deaths on that mountain.
Yeah.
And so you have to acclimate to each stage along the way. And I think that with any challenge, whether it's building a business or building wealth or recovering from divorce or getting an education, you have to take on a challenge. You have to have what I call adversity quotient. I think that's what they use in the literature here. And that means that you're able to take on a challenge that's hard, overcome the fear, overcome the anxiety, put in the daily work. And that's really disheartening because a lot of times the progress is beneath the surface. You don't see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to keep going and have the fortitude and the tenacity to hang on and keep going. And then what happens is you see it, it'll burst through. And you have to literally, they've done studies on this, especially with children. You celebrate the win, but you also have to celebrate the effort. And if you celebrate, great, I did what I needed to do. I got this done. It was hard. It's over. It's in my rearview mirror. As you do that, when you achieve the event, it's easier to do that if you celebrate the effort along the way because you don't quit. But more importantly, when you celebrate the event, they've done studies and dopamine levels go up. And so once they go up, what happens next is you're able to take on harder and harder tasks. So you have to use the mind as the tool that it is to actually facilitate you achieving the goal. And you have to understand it's a process. And as much as it's not pleasant, you have to grab onto it and hold on to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with all that.
What inspired you to start your business?
Well, I think lots of reasons, but the main one was that I didn't like being told what to do by other people who didn't know as much as me.
Okay.
And I wasn't able to progress in my career like I wanted to.
Okay.
Because I worked in the voluntary sector, so for charities, and the funding was short term, and so I got cheesed off with looking for jobs all the time, and I thought, no, I can do this better, and then bit off more than I could chew. But to be honest, I don't think I knew what I was doing when I set up the care business, because if I had, I wouldn't have done it.
So maybe that's the whole point. You had to learn it as you went. And I think that's true with everything. Like, honestly, okay, you get into financial advisory and you think, oh, I'm going to be advising people. Well, first of all, you have to learn it. And you think, I've got my licenses. Great. That's one barrier.
But then there's people.
Well, not only
people
that,
are variable, aren't they?
But here's the other thing. Just because I may have passed the license part doesn't mean I know how to apply it with confidence.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I know how to enter an order. Doesn't mean I have the depth of judgment to be able to tell. Yes, according to the license, I mean, like with everything, you have to put in the hours and the effort and the focus. And I like to call it, I like to park my ego by the sidewalk and learn. But I still have to believe that I can do it.
Absolutely.
So it's a golden middle of a balance. It's like, how the heck do you maintain that? But there's, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to do what you did. It takes courage to step out of the comfort zone. But what most people don't understand is that the comfort zone can be a cage.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I say to people all the time is like, look, if you don't make the financial decisions in your life, someone else will make them for you.
Yeah.
How comfortable are you with that reality? And here's the other thing. Is there anybody you trust that would be there to do it for you anyways? So if you can't, like, I have this conversation with people who have, who are elderly or who have elderly parents, and there's a lot of them. And it's sort of like, okay, do they have a power of attorney? Let's not talk about the medical issues. Let's talk about the financial issues. If something happens and they can't pay their bills, who's going to step in and deal with that? And then I ask them, like, who would you want to deal with that? Well, I don't know. Okay, if you don't know and you don't state what you want, somebody else is going to make that decision for you, and you may not like that person. And they may not do what you would want them to do. So radical ownership, it's funny. In my life, I'm not an addict. I've never been in recovery. I've never had to do that, okay? But I've had several people in my life as mentors and as clients who have gone through recovery. And I love their attitude because it is radical self-ownership. I'm responsible. I have to make the decision. I'm going to make the decision. And if it's not right, I'll make it right and I'll adjust, but I'm not going to let it slide.
Yeah, that's pretty much the attitude I had when I set up the business. And once I was in it and realised, oh my God, what have I done? But then I had to keep going because I took so much risk without realising that I would have to.
Right.
I took so much risk that the only option was to succeed because otherwise it would be catastrophic. My husband doesn't like risk.
Right.
So he struggled with it a lot.
Between the two. I get it.
Yeah, he struggled a lot, but I just went, I'm going to do it. I'm just determined I'm going to do it. And I had some really good, well, still got some really good staff who believed as well and wanted it to work. So we made it work.
That's great. Yeah, you can't do this alone, and nor should you. So one of the things, I don't know, you guys say this, tell me your friends and I'll tell you your future. That's a saying that goes around here.
Yeah.
And it's true to some degree. 80% of the American public struggles to understand the financial system that we exist in. 80%. And it's been going on, at least in the US, somewhere between 4 to 5 generations. So that's awful. And when you look at that, you look at the vulnerability, which came out during the shutdown for COVID, it makes sense because 2/3 of the American public would struggle to pay a bill if it was over a small amount of money, like $500. They couldn't pay a repair bill like that. They would struggle to get it done. And most of us don't have what's called an emergency fund. An emergency fund is just cash, currency on hand at the bank, not invested, that you could tap into immediately without an issue if there's an emergency. And people don't really understand that that's a necessity. People don't understand that that makes a difference. And here's the other thing that I see with business. When you take on a business, you've got the business financials you need to manage. And at that point, what you're doing and you have to face is that if you don't manage the business financials, it's catastrophic on the personal side. If you don't manage the personal financials, that's going to pull on the business side. So all of a sudden, and I want women to start businesses, you have to take radical ownership of your finances on 2 separate levels. And that's scary, but it's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the fact that you did it. I love the fact that you took on the risk, didn't know you were taking on the risk, and you kept going. That's literally perfect. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I just had to keep going. Once I was on a cliff edge and I was like, well, I can either fly or I can fall. So I had to fly.
That's perfect. I love it. I love it. One day I'm going to interview you about that. And I think that, I really think that that's critical. It's amazing. And I love that you did it. And I wish people in the culture, I don't know why envy is such a big deal. I think sometimes it's envy. I think sometimes it's fear. I think people need to start thinking in terms of, how can I take ownership of my life? What would make my life better? What can I do to be more in charge of my future?
Yeah.
So what does financial independence mean to you?
I think it's having enough so I don't have to worry about the things that you talked about. Like, if the washing machine breaks, I can just go and buy a new one or get it fixed. Like, I don't have to worry about it.
So in my studies, because I've really been looking at the psychology of helping people shift how they think, feel, and act with money. I want to be part of the solution in the United States and not part of the problem. And one of the things that I've realized is that the best frame of reference for people is usually the physical body. I don't know about you, but in the United States, people will spend money on their appearance, but they won't spend money on their development.
Yeah.
Okay, which is
I
crazy
think that's
to me.
true here as well.
Okay, time out. It matters to us how we look and feel. And I want people to take care of themselves. But the way I look at it, and I heard this from a trainer, was you start off with a range and things have to be sort of like, everything has to be functional. So, for example, about a month ago, I got over pneumonia. And at that time, my lungs weren't functional. I wasn't functional. I wasn't able to do what I needed to do. So I got knocked down to that stage.
Yeah.
When it's healthy and everything works better, you move to stage 2 on the range. And that's health, where things are working together. You move to a place of fitness where you're able to carry the load. Whatever the bills are, whatever the needs are, you're able to carry that. Financial independence means, for me at least, whether I work or whether I don't, I can still meet my obligations to myself, my family, and anybody that matters to me.
And I guess it's about having enough to be able to do the things that you want to make your life worth living as well.
Right. And I agree with that. And I think that that's financial independence is where you have enough wealth that pays you, whether you go to work or not, that you can still do the things you want to do.
There's something about as well when you're in that place where you haven't got enough money, and I've been there quite a few times, where something happens and it makes you feel physically, you have a physical reaction because you know that you can't afford to fix it if it's broken or whatever, you know what I mean? You haven't got that resource in reserve, and it affects your health.
Yes. I read a book by a woman who was a survivor of a sex cult. She was born into one. Her parents were in the sex cult. That's where she was born. And she escaped when she was 16. And she managed to pull herself to the U.S., back to her grandmother. She went to finished high school. I think she got a GED. Went to community college. Went to Georgetown University on a full scholarship. Not an easy thing to do. And then went to law school there on a full scholarship. And she wrote about it, and she described that you have responsibility. There's yourself, it's encapsulated in your body, and she did this whole thing. And what she forgot to do was to talk about money. Money is that thing that goes through the different layers, and it's the tool you use to care for the body, the self, and everything around you, and to develop out your tools so you can do more. And I've had that feeling too. My husband has had severe clinical depression for many years. And there have been times when he's not been able to work, and it's really put the family at a disadvantage. And it's a physical pain, and it's a psychological pain. It weighs on you when you can't do what you need to do. And you're dependent on either help, or you've got to figure it out, or it's a real struggle. And I don't wish those struggles on anybody.
Mm.
But those struggles are what's motivating me to do better and to do more and to give more, so that more people can do better and do more.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how technology is changing the world of work as well. Because I think like how you earn money is going to change.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not sure how that's going to look yet.
It evolves. I think everything evolves. It's funny. I remember we weren't allowed in my industry. It was very difficult to get consent to work from home. They didn't like that. And part of that was that they wanted to supervise activity. And in finance, that makes a lot of sense, okay? It just makes a lot of sense. Yeah. The technology has evolved, and laptops and computers are so much more powerful, and the security is more powerful, that became less of an issue. And then when the shutdown hit, in order for us to really continue working, we had to work from home. And right now, I'm at home in part because my office, don't ask, okay? My home internet is more reliable than my office internet, so it's okay. Right. But yeah, I mean, and it's more comfortable, and I take care of my dogs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like working from home, but I don't think it suits everybody in terms of like productivity and...
Oh, I agree.
And other, like if you're a young worker, I think it really benefits you being around other people with more experience and when you're learning.
I agree.
And there's other situations as well, so...
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I will not stay. Yeah, no, I agree. I'm 100% behind you.
Yeah, there's downsides as well as upsides. And when the lockdowns happened here, we continued working in the office because everybody wanted to anyway. But because with our care service continued running, because if we stopped, then people would probably die if they didn't get their care. So it was an essential thing that we kept going. So I was quite grateful for that, because I think it would have really affected my mental health had we not been able to continue. But so we continued to work from the office, and I just can't imagine that our care team, who are office-based, obviously our carers are out in the community, but the office-based staff, they wouldn't be able to do their job from home because most of the work is interacting with each other.
Yeah, and there is such a thing. Like, truthfully, I would much rather be in the same place with you and be able to look you in the eyes and talk to you.
Yeah.
Than to be like, this isn't real, and you don't get the same emotional connection when you're doing this. And I really think everybody suffered from the shutdown. Whether we were at work or not physically, we all suffered. The isolation, the fear, the anxiety, the lack of productivity. Fear, anxiety interferes with your ability to think and to produce. And we're meant to be in community. We are not meant to be Robin Crusoe trying to live out on an island by ourselves. We're just not.
Yeah. Having said that, though, I do appreciate the fact that we can have these sorts of conversations.
Right.
And, you know, that's why I've got my world map up here, because I'm meeting people from all over the world. And it's because of technology, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity if it wasn't for,
Well,
for technology.
one day maybe you'll come to the US and I'll find a way to meet up with you, or I'll go up to England and that would work. But you know, I think people,
There is something about meeting in person, though. You're absolutely right.
right. But there's also something about getting out of your comfort zone and taking on a challenge, and travel is one of those things.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed. Yes, there are differences in people because no one is the same. We're not cookie dough that we fit into a cookie cutter. Having said that, or biscuit cutter, I don't know what the term is, but there's an old.
Cutter works for us as well.
Okay.
Although we do tend to call them biscuits.
Okay, but think about it this way. It's pretty funny. Somebody once said that we are a common people divided by our language, divided by a common language. It's not quite the same, and that's fine. It's fun. I mean, meeting people from different places and talking about different experiences is a big deal. And by the way, I also noticed when I first started working in finance, I was the only woman at my level in my branch. And I had two children who were smallish. And the women who were in the support roles, many of them were not supportive at all. And one of them told me, she was working for me. She said, you know, we had a meeting and we discussed that we didn't think it was appropriate for you to be an advisor. Given the fact that you had children, you have an obligation to take care of your children. Excuse me?
That's not their decision to make, though.
Well, yeah, it's not their decision to make. And what's also interesting in the United States is that we're still not equally represented in the industry as advisors. But more than 50% of people who are in their 40s and 50s and managing wealth and inheriting wealth are women. So all of a sudden you have women who want to be understood, and frequently they come in and they're just like everybody else. They're like, what am I doing? Do I understand this? Do I know this? And they're not dealing with people who are just like them. Yes, I mean, I want to see people take the reins, desperately want to see people take the reins and manage their financial futures. I believe they can. I believe they should. I hope they do. But the industry needs to catch up and make it so that and attract enough women into the roles so that women can succeed there and meet the need of the client base, or else these firms are not they're going to have to shift. Either they'll shift or they'll die, and they're determined not to die. They have every incentive to keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I'm not sure that it's as attractive to women, just the whole numbers thing.
Okay, so, and I appreciate
I hate to be sexist. Maybe I sound sexist, but I just, you know, women tend to be drawn to caring roles and nurturing roles. And I know that's a stereotype, but it tends to be true.
You know, I understand that. And I wish people really could stop and think about it a little bit. And this is something that I've gained from the last 20 years. When I sit with a client, you don't live to work, you work to live, right? So I want them to not spend everything they make, and I want them to invest and build and build and build. But I want them to build in a way that they're comfortable. I want them to feel and be in control. And more importantly, I want them to understand that it's not about me, it's about them, and it's about them caring for themselves and the people that matter to them. So when you connect with their emotional why, and if their why is big enough, there's nothing they can't master. It's really about understanding that this is just, and back it down to a tool. And you know.
So money basically helps you to take care of everyone.
Yeah, to take care of yourself. And that's another funny thing that I find. I have a pet peeve, and I'm as guilty of it as everybody else. I will spend money on my children long before I will spend money on myself.
That's women in general, isn't it?
But it would be healthier, and I'm parking this at myself, so I'm holding the mirror up to me, and I'm going to say it would be healthier and better if I at least put myself, now that, especially that they're in their 20s, okay, and say they're as important as I am. I am as important as they are, not less, okay? And there also is something, and I mean this, and I had to learn this the hard way, okay? If I don't take care of me, and if I didn't do that when they were little, who was going to be there to take care of them or me?
Absolutely. And when my children were little, I didn't spend on myself. Every penny went on them. But now that they're older, now I spend me money on me.
Okay. You've earned it.
So I go for a regular massage, I get my nails done, get my hair done regularly, I'm looking after myself.
Good.
But unfortunately, I just wasn't able to when they were little. And I wished I could have been able to more, because it was important to be able to look after them. And I would have I would have been in a better position to look after them had I been able to look after myself.
Okay, I get it. And I think it's important to recognize that. I can't go back in time, and neither can you. And I
Absolutely.
can't. Right.
But that's partly about, it's not just about money. It was about the situation with family support and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think, as usual, it's an internal issue, okay? And obviously, we always have to make choices, always. And there's always trade-offs. There's no perfect solution. There's always a trade-off, and you lose something in order to make that choice. And I can honestly say that everything that I did for my kids, I'm grateful I was able to do. I'm grateful beyond words that I was able to do. Yeah, and I think most things, if you start with gratitude for what you have, and then you start believing that you have the instincts and the tenacity to be able to go on, it's just a question of building up that resilience, that ability to get right back up and say, okay, I made a mistake, I've learned, I'm going to keep going.
I think it's something that we don't have enough of, is gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like the word gratitude because of how it was used when I was little. When I was a little girl, I used to get the finger. You should be grateful of all the things that you have and all that, rather than it being a positive thing. So I don't really like the word gratitude, but I'm trying to change what it means. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. So one of the things that I do in my program is we talk about the mindset shift. So based on cognitive behavioral psychology, we know that how you think affects how you feel, which affects what you do.
You do.
Okay?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I do in my own life is I can actually pull it out, tiny little notebook. I take this everywhere. My adult kids are like, it's out. Why are you doing this? And first thing in the morning, I will write down things that I'm grateful for. And 90% of the time, it's the people in my life.
Yeah.
90% of the time. It may even be a bad interaction, but did it teach me something? Did I learn something? Yeah. Could I have done better? I'm grateful for that opportunity. And sometimes that's painful. I mean, I can't believe I'm about to say I'm grateful for the pain.
Well, it does give you a different perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, but it's hard. But this is a new habit of mine. So one of the things that I work on with people is, let's start with the mindset. If the word grateful was abused on you, if you experienced that abuse, let's see if we can find another word to replace it.
Yeah.
The other piece is sometimes they talk about anchoring it to a different memory. Mm-hmm. So if you can think of something from your childhood that was extremely positive and anchor gratitude to that memory, you can get past some of it. You can shift it. In a weird way, our brain is really designed to ensure our survival. Mm-hmm. And those emotions are signals. Something's right, something is wrong.
Yeah.
So if we can shift the story that you tell yourself consciously and subconsciously, we can shift the feeling.
So when I was doing business coaching, it was record your wins, because in business, there's lots of issues, there's lots of problems to solve, but you don't think about when it's going right.
Right.
And at first I found that really, really difficult. Like, what's going well? Can't think of anything. You start with the small things like, I noticed that the leaves are changing colour, and I really appreciated that there were like lovely shades of brown and orange, in the autumn. And it was sunny today. We don't get enough in my part of the world. So that made us feel better, that, those small things. And then by the time I'd been doing it for a few weeks, I ended up with massive lists of wins. And it does make you feel better when you've got a list of positive things rather than negative things.
Well, the other piece is, can we do what's called a cognitive reframe? Okay? So people will say, I have to go to work. I get to go to work.
Yeah.
I get to work. I have to make dinner. I get to make dinner. I get to make food that I like. I get to feed my family. Mm-hmm. And I know it sounds trite. I know it sounds a little over the top. But when you shift how you speak to yourself, okay. So it's funny. Have you ever heard of affirmations?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes, and this is for me, affirmations, when I do it, annoy me. And then I
Yeah, they're a
listen
bit
to,
annoying, aren't they?
yeah, they can be. And especially like if you have imposter syndrome or if you're a little bit of a perfectionist, it can sound like you're yelling at each other, yelling at yourself, right?
I think they can just be a little bit, if they're not quite right, I think they can feel a little bit fake
Huh? Well, that's another
and a little
problem.
bit forced.
Right. So that's another problem. You can't lie to your subconscious. You literally can't do it. Okay. So confidence, by the way, is evidence that your subconscious accepts. And you can't lie to yourself. Okay. You can, but not indefinitely. Your subconscious won't let you. Why? Because the brain is there to make sure you survive. It's not
Yeah.
there to make sure you're happy. It's not there to make sure you're successful. It's that you're still here.
Yeah.
So I heard a man named Andrew Huberman. He's a very famous podcaster out in California. He's a neurologist and a professor at Stanford Medical School. And he suggested taking affirmations. One, you can't leave room for doubt, and maybe sometimes celebrate the work and affirm, I do the work. I do this. I do this. And then what you can do is shift. This is Huberman's suggestion. And when you talk to yourself, or when I talk to myself, I'm harsher with myself than I would ever be with anybody that works with me, for me, or around me.
Absolutely.
So instead of actually talking to yourself in the first person, I know you're going to sound crazy, talk to yourself like you would coach somebody else. Treat yourself with the same degree of kindness and empathy that you would show for somebody else, that you were coaching and that you cared about and that you believed in. Okay. And when you do that, when I do that, all of a sudden it just becomes a heck of a lot softer. I'm doing the work. Okay. And then it becomes, instead of saying, I'm late on this, I've got to get this done. I'm doing the work. I'm getting it done. It is going. And then I shift to, you are doing the work. You are making progress. You are making a difference. Things are slowly starting to work out. You are seeing shifts.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you do that, you need to treat yourself with the same degree of kindness that you would treat somebody else you love.
Yes, I used to really struggle with this. Like, I'd have quite bad anxiety, and it was partly because I was speaking to myself so badly. And over the years, I've managed to shift that, and I don't feel anxious very often now.
That's amazing. And I hope people hear that, because it's possible and we all need to do it. I'm still a little bit more of a work in progress than it sounds like you are, but I'm getting there. So
I think it's always a work in progress. I wouldn't say I'm cured of anxiety all the time, because every now and again something will happen and I'll have a bit of a slip, and then I have to then talk to myself again, like, it's fine. Stop catastrophizing.
yep, absolutely.
And get into control again.
Yep.
But yeah, and yeah, so I think in the past though I wasn't able to enjoy it when it was going well, because I was waiting for something to go wrong and I wasn't talking to myself well.
So there's some techniques that I use, and one of them happens to be what's called the future self vision. And so what I'll have people do is, people need permission to dream. A lot of times people just don't believe that they can have what they want. And they need that permission. And then I walk them through doing the work that they would need to do to get there. And there's a system towards actually creating systems that get you to your goals and past your goals. But more than that is, with the future self-vision, I want them to envision themselves living the way they want to live. And I want them to write that out in a paragraph, 2-3 sentences, 2-3 paragraphs. Write it out by hand, okay? Because when you do it by hand, you etch that into your mind, into your subconscious. And again, it has to be honest, and you have to, and then I want you to read it aloud and read it into your cell phone. Why? Because I want you every night before you go to sleep to play it. I want you to use the power of your mind to align your actions and your thoughts with what your goals are. And so it becomes a way of short-circuiting or getting past that negative biofeedback loop where the subconscious doesn't believe it. I did it recently. I have a chocolate addiction. I'm freely going to
do as well.
I'm never going to go into recovery for that, but that's okay. I have a chocolate addiction. I acknowledge it. I'm not proud of it, but it is what it is. And I was at the store and I made the decision recently that I wanted to get some weight off and I wanted to get healthier and fit. I wanted to feel better and look better, but mostly feel better. So I was at the store and I walked past the chocolate right by the checkout lane, right by the cashier. They always have them strategically placed there
Of course,
for that
yes.
impulse buy. and I picked it up and I literally talked to myself, no, you know that this isn't going to get you to where you want to go. And I put it back. And I was so pleased that I put it. And you can do this retraining on any issue.
It's about focusing on it, isn't it? Because I think life's busy and sometimes you go off. You might have these good intentions, but then life happens and you forget what you are going to do. And it's about remembering in the moment.
Yeah, but it's also too about building your life and creating the system around you. So we default to our systems. People talk about habits. Habits really should be part of a system. So for example, if you're the type of person, like the author James Cleary talked about this in a book called Atomic Habits. And he said that if you're going to go running or exercise or to the gym or whatever it is after work, before you leave for work, set out your work clothes and your shoes so that when you come home, you see them, change into them, and go, and create a system that feeds that biofeedback loop. Okay? And when you do that, you set that up, the habits become more commonplace because it's a system that reinforces it. Where we get into trouble is when we try to build new habits and the system is interfering with the ability to do that. It takes more time than people realize. If you have a simple habit that deals with something fairly simple, not emotionally complicated, not tied to years and decades of stuff, you might be able to change it within 28 days. But the reality is, for so many of the things we do, especially when it comes to money, there have been impulses that have been going on in a system that we've used for biofeedback for decades. My mother's a chocoholic.
Yeah.
Okay.
But with money as well, it's emotional, isn't it? Because you might buy stuff to make yourself feel better.
Oh my God.
But that's not going to help your financial situation if you're trying to save up for something.
Well, it's again, like people who have the wealth mindset and who are determined to reach that point of financial independence where work truly is optional. Okay. They look at money as an opportunity to build. Okay, it's a tool to build something with. I was talking to a client of mine the other day. She didn't do something earlier on in her lifetime. There's parts of the American financial system that she just didn't take advantage of correctly. She's like, I missed out on that opportunity. She regrets the missed opportunity to invest that way. Okay, and she lives, it's funny, people have this image of wealth in the United States. And yes, there are people who are in the entertainment industry who live off on an extreme. But most of the people who have money in the US don't flash it. They don't flaunt it. It whispers. They're not interested in earning your approval because they have something. They don't care.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice to not care what other people think about your bank account? You shouldn't care.
Yeah.
It's none of their business. You don't have to impress them.
No. Yeah, I don't think I'm like that. I don't think I ever was really, really like that about impressing other people. But there has been times when I've wanted things because, well, I want that phone that's a bit more expensive because it does more and it's better.
Okay.
Or whatever, it makes me life easier or whatever. Or I'd like that more expensive handbag because I would like an investment. You know what I mean?
Right.
There is stuff that I like to... I like good quality stuff, but at the same time, if I need to save money, then I just don't buy stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
I just only have one argument with what you said, because I think the same way you do. Don't ever think of something like a handbag as an investment.
Like an investment in me, I meant, not really an investment as in a financial one.
That's great, but
a lot of people here
will sit there and say, well, Monica, why aren't you using a designer handbag? Why aren't you using something more expensive? And my response is, most of the people that I work with who truly have money have it because they don't waste it.
Yeah, they don't spend.
They don't want to see me trying to project out what I think they are. They choose me because they know I share their values. And it's just, when you're around people who can afford to buy the $3,500 bag and who don't, okay, they don't want to see somebody, it's a choice.
Yeah, they don't want to see someone who can't really afford it, who's bought it because they want to show off.
Yeah, and Yeah, I had some very funny stories with stuff like that. So it's also funny when people buy the fakes and think that that works.
Nah, I don't like fake stuff because it tends to be rubbish.
Right. Again, if I'm going to buy something in my head, I have a useful life for it. I'm going to be able to use it for this amount of time. And then if I exceed it, I feel like I got my money's worth or more than. And if it's less, then I feel disappointed. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's there to serve a purpose. I know that's very utilitarian. I want people to feel good. I want people to get those massages and to get the manicures and to take care of themselves. I do. But I want you to do that because you value yourself, not because you're trying to portray something you're not.
Have you got any advice for people who maybe they know that they spend in a way that they don't really want to? They want to change their relationship with money and the emotional connection with spending money.
Okay, so one of the first things that I like people to do is to get super aware of what they're doing. Most people will not track their assets. They just won't. Okay, now most American accounts have a function where you can flip a switch and see by category where your money's going. So you don't have to do the work. They won't do it. Yes, it would be better if people would do the work. But if you look at that, you say, okay, so you don't have what you want. Where do you have the strategic opportunity to make changes in what you're doing so that you can get to where you say you want to go? And once you put it to them, not in terms of budget, but in terms of being strategic, this is what you say you want. Where can you make changes and shifts to get there? Once they feel empowered to do it, if they truly want it, they'll do it, but you can't make somebody do what they don't want to do.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. So forgive me, I've got an allergy issue. I live in North Texas where the allergies are really bad, so I'm a little sniffly.
A few weeks ago it was the end of May, I went to London for the weekend, and honestly, the pollen, I've never seen anything like it.
Yep.
You could see it floating through the air, and it got to the back of your throat and the back of your nose, so people were walking around with like tissues over their faces, and people were coughing, and it was really bad.
I'm not quite that bad, but we're pretty bad. If I were to take a picture of my driveway or the area right outside my house, you could see the pollen on the ground.
I was going to say I'm not usually allergic to anything. I don't have hay fever or anything like that, but it was really affecting me. It was really bad.
That has to be really bad if it affects somebody who normally doesn't. I can't say.
I mean, it was affecting everybody.
Yep. It's North Texas. Everybody has allergies. If you don't have allergies when you get here, you will in a couple of years. So it is what it is. Anyways. Well, thank you so very much. I've enjoyed our conversation, and I hope
I was just going to ask if you've got something to promote.
Well, I have a program for the US, and if people want to do that, I'll give you a link, and you can actually put that down there, and they can use your last name and get a discount. But I appreciate having been here, and I do love talking to people in different places. It just reinforces we have more in common than we think.
Absolutely. It's been really enlightening. I've really enjoyed our chat. So thank you so much for coming on.
Anytime your people have anything they want to ask, I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.